So I'm Brian Jennings, the head of adult services at New City Library, and I'm here with Dana Munch and Nancy Moskowitz, two of our adult services librarians. And today we're talking about the best of our book club books. So we're going to talk about each of the different book clubs that we have at the library, and I'm going to let Nancy. Or do you want me to go through this one, Nancy?
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay. So the library currently has 5 book clubs. 2 of them are nonfiction book clubs, 2 of them are fiction book clubs, and one of them could go either way. I think with Rise and Read, generally fiction, but sometimes they also read nonfiction. So today we're going to talk about what each of those book clubs is, when they meet, when's the next time they're going to meet, and some of the favorite titles that they have read over the years. Now, I know a lot of you always ask, can you give us a list of all of the books that you're talking about? So we've already come up with that list, and we're going to email you after this with a list of all of the books that we talk about today. So Dana, take it away.
Sure. So I am going to introduce chapters because it is the book club that I lead each month. We meet on the second Tuesday of every month at 7 o'clock. It was the first book club at New City, so it is the longest running one. And we read all kinds of things. I like to refer to it as a literary free-for-all because we do touch on a lot of genres, but we find ourselves reading a lot of literary fiction usually. We have been meeting on Zoom, but starting in the summer, we are going to be meeting in person again, which is very exciting. So our next meeting is May 10th, and we are discussing Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. That one is on Zoom, and then starting in June, we will be meeting in person again. We've read all kinds of things over the years, so it was really hard to narrow it down to just a few to talk about today. But I chose these 3 because they're pretty different from one another, and they are all things that instigated really interesting conversations. So the first one is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This book is about a small town's junior ice hockey team. They are on the brink of victory when an incident occurs between their star player and the daughter of the general manager of the team. And this event ripples throughout the entire town and affects every single person. This book was really interesting because there's a lot of moral gray areas. So there was a lot to discuss, and there were some very strong feelings about the things that did and didn't happen. So it was a big favorite of our group. The second one is called The Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper by Phaedra Patrick. This book is a very sweet book. It's kind of a palate cleanser for when you've read a lot of difficult books. This book is about a 69-year-old man named Arthur who lives a very simple life, and it gets turned upside down when he discovers a gold charm bracelet that belonged to his late wife on the anniversary of her passing. And this charm bracelet is totally unfamiliar to him. He has never seen it before. He doesn't understand it. And it sparks a worldwide journey in which he tries to figure out where this charm bracelet came from. Each of the charms is from some incident of her life that he has had no idea about. And he kind of discovers a new side of his wife that he didn't know before. Like I said, it's a very sweet and nice story, but it also raised a lot of questions about what you do and do not know about a person and the lives you lead before you meet certain people. So that was very interesting. And the last book, This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger, is something that we read very recently. We only read it a couple of months ago. This book takes place in Minnesota in 1932, and it's about a group of orphans who are forced to flee from a school that's designated for Native American children who have been forcibly removed from their parents. So it's not a good place. The children escape down the Mississippi River in a canoe, and they encounter a cast of colorful characters in their search for home. So there's a lot involved with this book. Our group tends to really love historical fiction, so that ticked that check mark pretty easily. But there was a lot to talk about regarding the Native American school, about the ages of the children and what they're doing, and the types of people they meet, who can and cannot be trusted, the idea of home, the idea of belonging, community, all that stuff was very interesting to speak about. And that is chapters.
Okay, Investigating Mysteries is my group. We meet the fourth Monday of the month at 7 o'clock. Currently, we're meeting on Zoom. We started in 2005, and finding mysteries that are discussable, it can be a bit of a challenge, but mysteries have changed over the years. And we try to read lesser known authors. We don't read Mary Higgins Clark. We don't read John Grisham. We don't read the typical authors. I really delight in finding authors that people haven't read before. So what I like to do is find a book that has some ambiguity in it, reflects social problems, character driven, and cause us to have lively discussions. So we've found that we have a really good time finding the meat in the mystery besides just, did you know who the killer was? There's a lot more than what you might think. Our next meeting is May 23rd, and we'll be reading The Bird Watcher by William Shaw on Zoom. Okay, some of the titles that we've enjoyed. Now, everything I just said is contradicted by Peril at End House by that up-and-coming author, Agatha Christie. I try not to do a lot of Agatha Christie. We've done, I think, 3 in 16 years. But occasionally, I'll throw her in as, what Dana said, a palate cleanser. And we did enjoy reading her and discussing it and marveling at her intricate plots. So she is fun, but we try to avoid the better known authors. The second one we read pretty recently, called The Bishop's Wife by Meddy Ivy Harrison. This is the first in a series of a woman who is the wife of a LDS, Latter-day Saints bishop. And what we loved about the book was learning about the culture and the religion and the customs, and then discussing the role of women in the church and women in society in general. So we had great discussion on this book. We really enjoyed that one. And then finally, The Darkness by Ragnar Jonasson, which involved a woman who was retiring from her detective job in Iceland, and she was allowed to choose one cold case to investigate. And the case that she chooses involves immigration and human trafficking. And it turned into a really powerful book. And we enjoyed that one very much too. So as you can see, except for Agatha Christie, you probably haven't heard of these other 2 authors. So that's my focus in the group, is to introduce people to new authors that they can learn to enjoy and go read other ones on their own. Okay, that's it.
Okay, I'm going to talk about Facts, which is led by Sally Pellegrini. Now, Sally was a longtime head of community relations and local history librarian at New City Library. And this book club reads nonfiction. And it started out as a book club that was scholar-led. There was a grant through an organization called the New York Council for the Humanities, and they read a series of titles about the Hudson Valley. And so they started out reading local history titles, but they found out that those kind of dried up. So they started to more general nonfiction. They read a lot of history, a lot of biography, and a lot of the folks in the group have been meeting for some time. Now, this group has, at least in recent time, has always been a hybrid group, in the sense that one of their members moved to Kentucky, but enjoyed the group so much, and the group enjoyed him so much, that they were using Skype. If you remember before we had Zoom, we had Skype. So they used to Skype him in every week. So it was natural for them to go to a hybrid situation where they're meeting both in person at the street school and also on Zoom. There have been a few meetings recently just because of space issues. Last month's meeting was just on Zoom, but the folks at the town of Clarkstown have been great in giving us rooms at the street center, and the group loves meeting there. It's if you haven't been back to the street community center since they renovated it, it's clean and nice, a great location for us to use. So we thank the town for letting us use it. And the next meeting is May 18th. They'll be discussing Zero Fail, the rise and fall of the Secret Service. So that's what's coming up. Now, some of the favorite titles for facts are Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. Now, I wasn't we just asked Sally to kind of poll her group. And this is what they came up with. I wasn't there for this, but Bill Bryson is a notable writer of nonfiction. I think probably his most notable book is Walk in the Woods. I always think of that as a book that I read and I was laughing out loud. I take it that A Short History of Nearly Everything offers some of the same. And then 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. Again, I wasn't there for that discussion, but this was something that was on the New York Times bestseller list for a while, and it sounds intriguing. Profiles Encouraged by John F. Kennedy. I was there for this discussion. The book was ghostwritten by, I believe, Ted Sorensen, who was a speechwriter for Kennedy. But this group tends to often think about the history or the historical topics that they're studying in light of what's happening in contemporary society. And of course, we find that a lot of things are repeated in history over and over again. And in this case, this book is about different senators who had courage to speak up, even though it might mean that they might not get elected again or be appreciated much in their districts, let's say. It made me wonder, and I think some of the other folks wonder, do we still have people who are courageous in the Senate in that regard? So anyway, that's the type of thing that they read, and Profiles in Courage, even though it was ghostwritten, is a classic, I think, of American political history. So facts, you can sign up on the calendar and get the Zoom information, or you can also go to that one in person. Now, He Said, She Said is a memoir book club, which is led by Jody Hink, who is a substitute librarian, works occasionally for us in the Adult Services Department, and her full-time gig is at Nanuet Schools as a librarian. This group is probably, since the pandemic hit, I would say one of the more well-attended groups. And Jody has a really nice way of keeping in touch. If you do sign up for her group, it's all on Zoom. She'll have your email and she'll contact you during the month about what's going on. She may send you little snippets from the author if the author was interviewed and other things that are relevant. The next meeting of this group is June 6th, and it's both and A Life in Many Worlds by Huma Abedin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I believe that she was the wife of Anthony Weiner, who got into some trouble, but she also worked for Hillary Clinton. So this book, as in fact, a patron came into the library and was telling me how good that book was. So if you're interested, that's something you can check out. Some of the favorite titles that Jody's group has read are The Last Girl by Nadia Morad. It's a harrowing story of a young Iraqi woman kidnapped and forced into the ISIS slave trade. Another one is The Other Wes Moore by Wes Moore. A young African-American Rhodes Scholar reaches out to a man with his same name whose life took a tragically different path. That's The Other Wes Moore. And All Over But the Shoutin' by Rick Bragg. The author was born dirt poor in Alabama and was destined for either prison or the cotton mill, but became a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. All of those I hear really good things about. And I might also point out that early in the pandemic, I encouraged Jody to go onto Zoom. And so I would go to the meetings with her and help her with technology, make sure that everything was set. And then after a while, I stopped going. I said, well, you don't really need me. You know how this works. But early in the pandemic, one of the first books that she read, I read with her group. I really enjoyed. It was called The Job by Steve Osborne. It's not included. This is only for the people who come to the webinar. You have to come to the webinar. It's good information. And the guy is a retired New York City police lieutenant, and each chapter is a different part of his experience as a police officer. And it was right early in the pandemic. We had things going with Black Lives Matter, and I remember reading a lot about anti-racism and things. And then I read this book, and not that he necessarily talked about race, but it was kind of like we stereotype people, oh, the police are bad of it. And this guy is like a regular guy, and he's talking about, being nervous as a young police officer. And of course, the 9/11 story, where were you that day? And recalling it and those sorts of things. So that's another good book, just for you people who logged into the webinar. I'll tell you to check out Steve Osborne, The Job. And I think he lives in Rockland County. It's one of those things where you're reading a book and you're like, I think this guy, a lot of police officers live in Rockland from NYPD. So another little thing. He's probably our neighbor. Go ahead, Dana.
And for our last book group, I'm going to talk about Rise and Read, which is led by Mark Gervino. They meet the fourth Thursday of every month at 10 o'clock in the morning, which is perfect for the early birds. They meet in person, and right now they are meeting at Atria Senior Living, which is located at 269 North Main Street in New City. So they read a lot of different things. Like Brian said before, it could be fiction and nonfiction, but they kind of lean towards fiction generally. Their next meeting is going to be May 26th, and they are discussing Admission by Julie Buxbaum. And like I said, they will meet at Atria Senior Living. And we asked Mark for some of their favorite titles. This is a newer book club, so we have two from them. The first one is Dry by Neal Shusterman. And this is a story of a young girl who, along with her brother and friends, are on a mission to find water as the US government has cut off water to their area of the country. This book explores the reactions of people when an important resource that is generally taken for granted is no longer there. And their discussion was a look inside of, they discussed things like mob mentality, shortages, how far people will go to get the essentials that they need, trying to protect your family and take care of yourself, which you can imagine generated a very lively discussion. The second book is Misconduct by Penelope Douglas. In this book, a teacher falls in love with the father of one of her students. They both have some incidents in their past that they're trying to keep hidden from one another, and those secrets, combined with the taboo nature of their relationship, cause obstacle after obstacle. This is a romance novel, and it was the group's first one, so there were many questions that were generated from this talk. Things like, is it appropriate for a teacher to date a student's parent? How can parents be, so uninvolved or involved in their children's education? Should someone's past play a part in their current relationship? And they just generally spent a lot of time talking about relationships and the different dynamics and circumstances that can create different events.
This information, on this slide, the most popular book club books of 2021 was a survey that was done by Book Browse, which is a resource that we subscribe to. It's well, I'll talk about it in another slide, but you can look at some of the titles here that were the most popular. One of them was the one that Dana did, called This Tender Land. So this gives you some idea.
And we are going to be reading Hamnet later in the summer too, which is on here.
Okay. One thing I might want to add is that we do get the books for you, and they are at the library. So if you want a paper copy, we have them there. You don't have to get them on your own. And we also try to get them available as electronic resources, either on Hoopla or Libby. And if we can get the audio, and we get the ebook. So if you, once in a while we can't, but most of the time we can. So you don't need to collect the books yourself. We'll do that for you. Okay, now the resources I'm going to mention here, Book Pages. I'm sure anyone who comes to the library has seen that little monthly magazine. They even have a little column about books that they recommend for book clubs. Book Browse is the online resource that is it's excellent to get choices for just reading for yourself or for your book club. That's available on our A to Z database page. We do announce information on book clubs in our New City Library, the quarterly newsletter, and also in the monthly newsletter. It'll tell you what we're reading for the next 3 months, how we're meeting, and any other information you might know. And finally, the best resource of all are librarians. Just ask us. If you come in and you're not sure what to read, you have no idea, just ask us. We always will have a suggestion, and that is what we do. That's our job. So please feel free to ask. The librarians will always come up with something for you.
And we are going to close out our presentation with something very exciting. So we recently started a podcast. It is hosted by myself and another librarian, Veronica Reynolds, who you may know from our many programs. And it's called I Miss the Book Club. So the idea was born from this idea that there's lots of books that our book clubs are reading, and not everyone gets to go to them and experience them. So we are aiming to do 2 episodes a month. One of those episodes will be a recap of chapters and what we read and how the group felt about it. And then the other episode will be something literary adjacent, just book talks about different topics. And we plan to have some of our other librarians who run the book clubs on as guests, and we'll see how it goes from there. We've only done 1 episode so far. It is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio, so pretty much anywhere that you get your podcast. The next episode will come out this coming Wednesday, and then it will be every other Wednesday after that. So I definitely encourage you to take a listen. They're not super long, so it's a very digestible, interesting little audio treat for your day.
We had a comment in the chat about wanting to see the best book club books of 2021.
Well, we hope that you will consider joining one of our groups. That maybe something about the group that will appeal to you, because new members are always welcome, and it's a very stimulating activity. So I hope
I think it's very fun.
It is.
And I think people really like to talk about, it's just nice to have other people to talk about things with when you're reading something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yes, there's always room for one more. So.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.